Shalom, beautiful people of God. My name is Chris, and I come your way with daily Devos today. Today we are looking at the book of 1 Corinthians, the chapter 14, where the Apostle Paul writes to the church in Corinth and talks to them about tongues and prophecy. Now, in some Bible versions, you see the headings given. So, in this case, the heading was tongues and prophecy. For my Bible, for instance, which is the NLT Bible, the heading was given as tongues and prophecy. So he spoke of the two simultaneously under the heading tongues and prophecy. 1 Corinthians chapter 14, verse 1 to 25. But have you ever wondered why the heading is written as tongues and why he spoke tongues and prophecy, and why he spoke of the two simultaneously? He could have spoken of the two separately, but he didn't do that. Rather, he said tongues and prophecy. That means these two can't do without each other. So tongues and prophecy go hand in hand. They cannot do without each other. Now in verse 2 and 3, and I quote, "For if you have the ability to speak in tongues, you will be talking only to God. Since people won't be able to understand you, you will be speaking by the power of the Spirit." I want to repeat this again from the NLT Bible, and I quote, "For if you have the ability to speak in tongues, you will be talking only to God. Since people won't be able to understand you, you will be speaking by the power of the Spirit." Now, in the next verse, which is verse 4, he tells the church tongues is for personal edification, but a word of prophecy strengthens the entire church. Tongues is for edification, but a word of prophecy strengthens the entire church, which is very true. But why is Apostle Paul telling the church that prophesying is greater than speaking in tongues? Or in his case, he prefers that everybody in the church prophesies for the sake of the understanding of the whole church and for the sake of the progress and growth of the whole church. Now let's look at verse 6. 1 Corinthians chapter 14, verse 6. "Dear brothers and sisters, if I should come to you speaking in an unknown language, how would that help you? But if I bring a revelation or some special knowledge or prophecy or teaching, that will be helpful." I want to repeat this again. "Dear brothers and sisters, if I should come to you speaking in an unknown language, how would that help you? But if I bring you a revelation or some special knowledge or prophecy or teaching, that will be helpful." So the Apostle Paul is making it clear here that a word of prophecy is really important and helpful for the church, which is very true. So he prefers that everyone in the church prophesies rather than everyone in the church speaking in tongues. He speaks of a special knowledge or a special prophecy or a special teaching which will be helpful for the church or to the church. But the question is, where is this special knowledge, this special prophecy, this special teaching, or this special revelation going to come from? It can only come from God. And how do we talk to God directly to get access to these? Is by praying in the language of the Spirit, which is speaking in tongues. The language of the Spirit guarantees us direct access to God. And God speaks back to us in the form of this special revelation or this special knowledge or this special prophecy the apostle speaks about. So it is in speaking in tongues that we get access to special prophecy or special knowledge, which we bring to the church for the edification and growth of the church. Now, the apostle was not downplaying the importance of tongues. What he was trying to say is that when we gather in church or as a church, we shouldn't always be speaking in tongues. I don't know a church where when you go, all they do is speak in tongues for the duration of the service. I've never seen that before. So, if somebody has seen that before, you should let me know. Yes. So, all he's trying to say that when we gather as a church, we shouldn't even just spend time only speaking in tongues. Somebody might walk into the church so desperate and in need of a message, and that person won't get that message. So he says, come to the church with a special message, a special knowledge, a special prophecy, a special word for the church and for the good of the church. But we can only get this special knowledge or these special prophecies only by communicating with God. And the only way that is by speaking in tongues. No one can know a person's thoughts except that person's own spirit. And no one can know God's thoughts except God's own spirit. And we have received God's spirit so we can know the wonderful things God has for us. 1 Corinthians chapter 2 verse 11 to 12. The Bible says that no one knows the thoughts of a man except the spirit of that man. No one can know the thoughts of God except the Spirit of God. And we have the Spirit of God. And it is by the ability of the Spirit that we speak in the language of the Spirit, which is tongue speaking. So as we speak in tongues, we communicate directly to God, and He talks back to us through revelations. And these revelations are what we bring to the church. So speaking in tongues is very important. The message the apostle is trying to send across is that we should spend time praying in our secret chambers, praying in our place of prayer in tongues, spending time praying in tongues, receiving special knowledge and special revelation and special prophecies from God, and bringing that message to the church for the good and the edification of the whole church. That is simply the message the apostle was putting across. He says in verse 5 that prophecy is important than tongues speaking. He says in verse 5 of the same chapter that prophecy is important than tongues. But then in verse 18 he says, I thank God I speak in tongues more than any of you. He says he thanks God that he speaks in tongues more than anybody in the church. Why is this so? He was full of revelations. The Apostle Paul was full of revelations because he spoke in tongues a lot. He spoke in tongues a lot. And he got so many revelations which he brought to the church. He got so many revelations which he brought to the church. Now we can notice from the ministry of the Apostle Paul that he was mostly establishing new churches in different countries. You can only do this by revelation. You can only establish a church if you have a message. And clearly the apostle was full of revelations and full of messages, full of the word which he received directly from God because he spoke in tongues. So it is important that we speak in tongues. And in speaking in tongues, we receive a message from God for the church, which is for the edification and good of the whole church. So let us spend time in our closed doors, secret places, in our place of prayer, speaking more in tongues, receiving the revelation from God, receiving a message from God for the church, because the church needs a message. The church needs a message. Shalom. God bless you all.